nation of Israel that will turn their hearts to the Lord just before the kingdom age, and they will join with the 144,000. And Isaiah tells us they will come with joy and singing before the Lord, and this whole thing will be a great national choir there, and what they're going to sing. Isn't that interesting? Well, we find when we read Revelation, if you just read Revelation, you would say, well, it's 144,000 are going to sing. But then when we go back to Isaiah, we find that, oh no, it's all of the nation of Israel that knows the Lord will come with singing. And I thought, well, that's kind of cool. That's kind of cool. I don't know if I want to make this into the whole lesson, but did you turn it back on? Okay. But then I thought, wait a minute. When I go to the commentaries, and when I go, there's two places in Isaiah that this verse is word for word copied. Isaiah 35. Go to Isaiah 35. Interesting. Now, I believe the King James Bible is the best translation. But I went to the Hebrew and looked at that verse, Isaiah 51:11, and then I went to Isaiah 35:10. And although the King James translators, they put redeemed in for one and they put ransomed in for the other, so there's little minor changes, but in Hebrew it's exactly the same words, exactly the same verse that what they just sang. I wish they hadn't have, kind of changed a little bit, because when we go there, we wouldn't recognize it right offhand. But why, when I see something like that, I think, wait a minute, why would God put in a book the same verse? Not a little short, Jesus wept, place. This is a long verse. Why does he use this verse in two different chapters? One in chapter 35 and one in chapter 51. 51, he's talking about the nation of Israel coming to Zion. Guess what chapter 35 is going to talk about? You and me coming to Zion and singing. And the Gentiles of the world. Now you say, okay, that's a pretty tough order, Clyde. Are you gonna back that up? Let's see. Let's go here and let's just read a few of these verses. I want to read verses 1 through 4. What area is Isaiah addressing in chapter 35, 1 through 4? It says, the wilderness and the solitary place shall be glad for them, and the desert shall rejoice and blossom as a rose. That should sound similar to an Eden thing, okay? And it shall blossom abundantly and rejoice. We're going to get ding marks. You can't play that one. We might get in trouble. Okay. We're sorry, YouTube. We didn't mean to. That was a blooper. We didn't mean to put that out. It shall blossom abundantly, verse 2, and rejoice even with joy and singing. The glory of what? Lebanon. Now he's talking about those nations outside of Israel. He says the glory of Lebanon shall be given to it, an excellency of Carmel and Sharon. That's up on the very border, a couple of mountains on the very border of Israel. They shall see the glory of the Lord and the excellency of our God. They're going to see the glory of God. Remember when Jesus told the disciples, some will be here that will not see death until they see the coming of the kingdom in all its glory. Remember that? And who did he take with him? Peter, James, and John, right? Up to the Mount of Transfiguration, and he transfigured in front of them, and they seen his glory. That's what they were seeing. They seen Jesus' glory. And here, he's saying that they shall see the glory of the Lord and the excellency of our God. When Jesus returns, he's not going to come back as just a normal man. He's coming back in his glory, his shining glory. There will be no question as to his majesty. And they're going to see his glory. Who? Lebanon and those on the outskirts of Israel. Let's go on. Let's read on. Strengthen ye the weak hands and confirm the feeble knees. Say to them that are of a fearful heart, be strong, fear not. Behold, your God will come with vengeance, even God with a recompense. He will come and save you. So Jesus is coming to recompense something that I have a problem with somebody, and I say, I'm going to turn that over to the Lord. I could go over there and slice their tires. I could go over there and spread some Roundup on their garden. I could do some stuff, some really rotten stuff, but I'm turning it over to the Lord. And Jesus said, vengeance are mine, I will pay. This is when Jesus brings vengeance for us. Right here. Isn't it interesting? That's at the beginning of the kingdom age. He's going to bring vengeance for us. That's why it's easy for us, well, I shouldn't say easy. It's easier for us to say, I'm going to give it to God. I'm going to let him take care of this bad person. And we've had some bad people that we're glad that God took care of them. But God's going to move people out and give them the recompense that they deserve. That's why we can forgive and say, the day is coming when you're going to get paid back. This is when it happens. This is when he says he recompenses. Okay? Verse 4. Now it says there, what area is Isaiah addressing in 35, 1 through 4? Israel's borderlands, up by Lebanon and Sharon and around there and Carmel, these places. Okay, let's go on. What will the deserts look like? Let's read on a little bit. Then the eyes of the blind shall be opened, verse 5, and the ears of the deaf shall be unstopped. Jesus did some miracles when he was on the earth, but here, all of those that enter into the kingdom, at the beginning of the kingdom, all the deaf will hear, all the blind will see. He goes on, he says in verse 6, then shall the lame man leap like a hart. What's a hart? Some of your Bibles, you might have a different translation. What's a hart? Deer. A deer, yeah. So those that are lame will be able to leap like a deer. Wow. I don't think that's just God saying, well, it's going to be pretty good. I think he's saying this is exactly what it's going to be like. Going to be able to clear a tree, leap over. Okay, where am I at? In the tongue of the dumb shall sing, for in the wilderness shall waters break out, and streams in the desert, and the parched ground shall become a pool. You ever seen the pictures of Israel today? Everything is parched ground, isn't it? The parched ground shall become a pool, he says. And the thirsty land, springs of water, in the habitation of dragons. Now, it's not talking about the dragon, what we usually think of as dragons. This is a jackal or a wild dog. Where each lay shall be grass with reeds and rushes. That is interesting. So God's going to change everything around. Everything is healed. And the land of Israel will have springs breaking up, coming up. And it will be a land like Eden, we found in chapter 51. But here he's talking about those lands that are on the outside. Let's go to the next question we have here. What will the deserts be like? got pools of water, and you got rushes and grass. Lush. Israel is going to be lush with vegetation. God is going to completely bring it. Now, the next question, and this is an interesting one. Let's read verse 8, and then we'll go to the question. Okay? It says, and a highway. And I thought, okay, what's he talking about? What is a highway? It's exactly what we think it is. It's a road. A big, wide highway. A road. And a highway shall be there, and a way, and it shall be called the way of holiness. God's going to name this highway he's going to put there. He's going to call it the highway of holiness. Now the Gaithers call it the highway of, what's the word, Margie? Holy highway. They call it the holy highway. And I don't know if they know what they're singing. They're singing about this highway. And this highway is what we will walk on. Now let's look at some more in this verse 8. The unclean, the way of holiness. The unclean shall not pass over it. But it shall be for those, the wayfaring man, though fools, shall not err therein. So it will not be for the unclean. Now we should be thinking, okay, Luke chapter 12, he was talking about some are going to be going into the kingdom and some of them are going to be going out into the wilderness. We should be thinking the unclean can't walk on this road. Who would they be? Those that were put in the wilderness, that did not live their lives. They will not be able to walk on this road. Let's read on verse 9 and you'll see that. No lion shall be there, nor any ravenous beast shall go up there. It shall not be found there, but the redeemed shall walk there. And the ransomed, and this is exactly the same verse that we just got done hearing in chapter 51. And you can see it's almost the same, except they use the word ransomed instead of the redeemed. And it says, the ransomed of the Lord shall return and come with Zion with songs of everlasting joy. Upon their heads they shall obtain joy and gladness. In the other one it says gladness and joy. And sorrow and sighing shall flee away. So whoever's getting on this highway is going to Zion, and they're going to be singing to the Lord. And not everybody can get on this highway. Now, you say, well, I don't really understand. Let's go to your paper and look under D, under the third thing down, Isaiah 49. I put the verse in there so we could kind of look at it. Again, Isaiah gives us the answer to it. Isaiah 49, verses 11 to 12. And I will make all my mountains a way, and my highways shall be exalted. God's highway is going to be lifted up. Now he goes on, behold, these shall come from far, and lo, these from the north and from the west, and these from the land of Shinim. Okay, means distant lands, Shinim. I thought, okay, I've never really seen this word Shinim before. Not real sure what that means. I go to the Hebrew dictionary, and it says it's only used one time in the Bible. Only one time this word is used in the Hebrew Bible. And it means thorns. Thorns. So, when he says that those that are from the north and the west will come, and those from the land of Shinim, the thorny land, won't be able to make it to Zion. Won't be able to walk on the highway to Zion. The thorny land. It's going to be like Eden, right? Israel's going to be like Eden. That outside of Israel is the wilderness where the thorns are. And the thorns out there are what dictates where Shinim is. It's outside of Zion. Okay? This is a lot to chew on, isn't it? a lot to chew on. I hope that you remember some of the previous lessons, that we, especially in Luke chapter 12, where we talked about that. Okay? So, we're talking Gentile nations. Zechariah chapter 14. Let's go to Zechariah chapter 14. He told us here that they're going to come from the north, they're going to come from the west. Let's go to Zechariah chapter 14. That's not in your paper there. That was a new addition I put in. Z-E-C-H, Zechariah 14. He's talking about the same time. These people that are in the world during the time of the millennial age. What will it be like for those people at that time? Now we come back as the church. We return with Christ. We find that in Revelation. We return with him, riding on white horses. Remember that? We come back in white robes, and we come back and we rule and reign with him. But he says here in Zechariah chapter 14, verses 16 through 19, take a look down to 16 through 19. And it shall come to pass that everyone that is left of all the nations which came against Jerusalem shall even go up from year to year to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, and to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. Everybody that's left of all those that came against Jerusalem. When do we find all the nations assembling against Jerusalem to destroy Jerusalem? Armageddon, right? Armageddon. So everyone that's left in the world, God destroys all the armies at Armageddon. But everybody that's left, you have a requirement from the King of this world, Jesus Christ, in Jerusalem. You have a requirement to keep the tabernacle, the Feast of Tabernacles. Now, if we're thinking of the Feast of Tabernacles, what did the young Jewish boy have to do when the Feast of Tabernacles came about? He had to go to Jerusalem, didn't he? 3 times a year. 3 times a year, the male Jewish man was supposed to go to Jerusalem and offer his sacrifice. Here he says, these nations of the world, these other nations, they are going to be required to come to Jerusalem to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. You know, America is going to be required to go to Jerusalem. At least all the young guys are going to be required to go to Jerusalem to keep the Feast of the Tabernacles. And how are they going to get there? The highways. The highways that are being constructed when Jesus returns. Isn't that interesting? Now, let's read verse 18, where he explains a little bit more. Or let's go with verse 17. And it shall be that whosoever will not come up of all the families of the earth unto Jerusalem to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, even upon them shall be no rain. Kind of makes you think that there's probably some countries in the world that say, we're not going to go up to Jerusalem, we're not going to worship Jesus, we're not going to do that. And when that happens, God shuts the spigot off and there's no more rain for that country. Let's go to verse 18. And if the family of Egypt go not up, and come not, that have no rain, there shall be the plague wherewith the Lord will smite the heathen that come not up to keep the Feast of the Tabernacles. The more we learn about prophecy, I know we're going through Revelation and we're in Revelation 14 and we want to get to the other 5 angels and the different things that are happening there. But we really need to get a handle on what's going on with 144,000 are going to be singing there. But guess what? So will the rest of the world. They're going to be traveling on these holy highways to Jerusalem to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. And if they don't, what happens to their country? No rain. No rain. Yeah. Okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much of what I've done so far makes sense? Give me a hand if you got a 10. You think you understand what I'm saying so far? Okay. How about a 9, 8, 7? How many are thinking, man, I'm kind of lost? Okay. Are you sometimes? If it is, I want to slow down.
This is during the tribulation.
No, this is not during the tribulation. This is when Jesus sets up his kingdom. This is at the beginning of the 1,000-year reign of Christ. Right at the end.
I thought all Christians were supposed to come in, so.
Yes.
You're saying unsaved come in too then?
Yes, those that are left on the earth that were not killed during the tribulation. Yeah. Does that make sense? Maybe. Those that were not killed during the tribulation that didn't receive the mark, because if they receive the mark, they're going to hell, that's for sure. The Bible tells us that. So those that are left in the earth, apparently some of them are still a little bit rebellious, because they're not going to come up and say, I'm not going to keep the Feast of the Tabernacles over in Jerusalem. Why would I want to do that? And meanwhile, God has elevated, and I'm physically thinking of I-75, this highway. But I'm sure it's not an I-75. It's probably 100 I-75. Super huge and wide. And nobody can walk on that highway except those that are overcomers at this time.
Wouldn't it be, I thought only the redeemed that didn't get the mark that come into the millennium, but then I thought that there's a lot of births and stuff, and that's the ones that reject Christ in terms
That may
of
be,
and
yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, you know, because boy, when you get into that, what about all the babies that are going to be born during the tribulation? You know, and they're going to be younger than they could actually make a decision to get the mark or not get the mark. That's a real, and that's what B and I were talking about at some extent at what God. It says in the New Testament that the children of those that are born again, their children are sanctified. Even if one of them is born again, Paul tells us, else their children are pure. They're sanctified. They're not under God's judgment. And I take that personally, and I don't get any other stuff, that those that are believers, their children will go into the kingdom age. But those that are not believers, their children will not go into the kingdom age. And if one is a believer and one is not, their children are sanctified and the children go into the kingdom age. Okay? I know you'd like me to pull a verse out and say,
Wouldn't that be up to a certain age though?
Yeah, and and we're going down this road a little bit, but sometimes, when you read Bible commentators and those that are expositors that bring out a lot of the deep stuff, they will look at the children of Israel were responsible from 20 years old and over for making the decision not to go into the promised land. Remember that? So it was 20 years old. So they point to that and they say 20 years old is the age in which the age of accountability. And I realize that most Bible teachers would say, it's a lot more than that. I was saved when I was 10, or I was saved when I was 9, so it must be a lot younger than that. But that's one of the explanations that's given. And you can chew on that, or like a guy at the shop I used to work with, put it in your pipe and smoke it. Let's see what you think about that.
I have a question.
Okay.
I don't know, you're not gonna really answer that. The 144,000, okay, it's a 7-year period there, so thus they have to be born before that 7 years, because they have to be at least in the 20s to be. Okay, would they be, set apart in the middle, saved then, or would they be saved and not go to heaven?
I know it. There's a big, you can get, and I'm going to say 50-50. Some people say they are murdered. They're martyrs. And they go to heaven and they return with Christ. And some of them say, no, and this is what I believe, when they were sealed in chapter 7, that means God sealed them. He's going to keep them alive all the way to the end of the tribulation. That's what that sealed means. And that's the way I lean,
But they preach, don't they?
but,
Don't they?
well, it doesn't say that they evangelize, but the insinuation is that the whole world receives the gospel and many multitudes come to Christ, and it's right after the mention of the 144,000. So most commentators will say it's because of the preaching of the 144,000, and they call them evangelists. They say God has protected them, He sealed them with His mark, and they make it through the whole 7-year time period. And they end up at the end of that 7-year time period standing on Mount Zion singing to Jesus Christ as He's returned. Okay? Now we will be returning with Him. But remember, in your scriptures, God often doesn't talk about what happens to the Gentiles. Gentiles are not really, we're reading a book that was for the Jews, and prophecy is of the Jews. So if we want to find a little bit of nuggets here and there, we got to look pretty close. And when we see this word Shinim, the land of thorns, outside of the land that's like the Garden of Eden, that tells me something, that may be where Luke was talking about, where those that are sent out to the wilderness and to the place for the hypocrites, they don't make it into the promised land. I'm not talking about not being saved. Don't ever get that. That's not, I'm talking believers that do not receive any reward, but instead are assigned to live where the thorns are shining. I think that may be what this interpretation of this passage is. Okay? Any more of this? Bill?
Is that when the judgment, when everybody's works is judged and
No. Yeah,
burned with fire?
you're right in that there will be a judgment. The Bema seat, well, the Christians will go through the Bema seat, and then, of course, Jesus separates the sheep from the goats, and all those that receive the mark of the beast, they are thrown into the lake of fire. Okay, and then later on, at the end of the 1,000-year reign, the great white throne judgment is when the books are open and people are judged out of the books as far as what degree of punishment they will receive, if they're going to heaven at all. Okay, that's the one I think you're referring to. There's actually 3 different judgments there. One is when we die as the church, in the church age, we stand before the Bema seat of Christ and give an account of those things that we have done in the flesh.
In our works that we've done.
And our works follow us, and we receive rewards or not rewards. No rewards. We could go with no rewards, because the Bible talks about those that make it yet so as by the skin of their teeth. They just barely make it. I mean, they're really pain in the butt Christians. But they're going to make it not because of anything that they've done, but because of who they believed in. Okay, so they're going to be they're going to be judged that way. But on the other hand, there's another judgment at the end of the tribulation, and it's called the judgment of the sheep and the goats. That's when Jesus separates the sheep from the goats, and says some will be on my right hand, some will be put to the left hand, and those, I believe it is on the left hand, they will be put into the lake of fire. They are those that receive the mark, or those that have not embraced the Messiah. Okay? So now we're moving on past that time of the sheep and goat judgment. A little bit past that, days, months, I don't know, a little bit of time, we're moving into the next stage of it, and Jesus is at the Mount of Zion in Jerusalem. The 144,000 that have made it through are there singing before Him with a song that no one can learn. We learned that from Revelation. They're singing this song. And then we find out in Isaiah that all of the nation of Israel will be singing there too. And in fact, they're going to be in a land that looks like Eden. the land of Eden. And I think God is giving us a hint when he tells us outside of this land there's going to be highways that are going to various parts of the earth. So some to the north, south, east, west. Some of them go different places. But they go to Shining. Only use one place in the Bible. The land of thorns. So if you got Eden over here and the land of thorns, that should tell us something about when God threw Adam and Eve out of the garden, right? He said the ground will bring forth thorns and thistles and everything. And this will be where those, I believe, what he's talking about, an interpretation of it, that those that were not faithful to the Lord, they're not overcomers, that's where they reside. In the land of thorns. I'm hearing all the turning, and
the last judgment is
Yeah.
only for the unsaved. The great white throne
Right.
judgment, that's only for the unsaved.
right, the
That's
great
not
white
for-
throne judgment is that's when all of those, and here again, this is where B and I were kind of, is it this way or that way? And she's probably right and I'm wrong. But anyways, I believe that the Old Testament people that were believers, I believe that they will be in heaven with us they will be judged, and they will come down with us at Jesus' return and setting up his kingdom and everything. And I believe that B will be saying, no, they don't come then. They come later. I think that's what she's saying. I'd have to ask her her interpretation of it, but I don't think she thinks that the Old Testament people, the believers, are resurrected until that judgment, the great white throne judgment at that time. But if you want to be right. Okay.
Tell her what he said.
No, don't do me. Don't do. Yeah, don't. She's probably right. B, you're probably right. Yeah. Okay. I got that off my chest. I don't want to hurt a few. Now there's. I had it. Oh, here it is. Talking about a highway that leads to Zion. Did you know that today there's a highway? Israel has 4 ways to get to Zion today. You can go by train from Tel Aviv. It's going to take you 1 hour and 40 or 54 minutes. It'll cost you $7 US money. There's already a highway going to Zion from Tel Aviv.
So these highways you talked about, that talk about Bible, that's gonna go all over the earth.
Yeah. And I sit and I think, okay, God's got a problem. He doesn't have a problem. But how does he get the highway to go across the Atlantic and get over to America? North and South America and everything. He must be going. And I don't think of it as a highway like an I-75, although that's a visual that you can use as kind of a proof text. But I think it's like 100 lanes wide, and it's a holy highway. Okay, go ahead, Jimmy.
And there won't be any oceans, because all the mountains and stuff would be everything.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
So that's where the roads.
Yeah. That's another thing, will there be any, says there'll be no more seas back in Revelation chapter 20, so apparently there's seas before that, but does that mean oceans will?
When them mountains go flat, they gotta go somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, that's gonna cover up, you figure,
Yeah.
Mount Everest and all them ones,
Mhm.
can you imagine if it's gonna go flat?
Mm-hmm.
He can hold back the water for Moses. He can-
It's an amazing, I wish God put another chapter in there about how this all works out. But we're going to be amazed. And the point is, God is making highways. Now, Margie's gonna play, but you got to, by the way, this is sung by the Gaithers and Ernie Haas. And when I rode away to the Gaithers, and asked them if I had permission to play this song for you all and have it put on YouTube. They said no.
It's one of my favorite songs.
So apparently,
It's copyrighted.
it's a copywritten song that I feel like God gave that song to somebody, and this is that song.